So we should have already read the chapter 2 and part of chapter 3 in the Starting Out with Visual Basics 2012 6th edition. Um, so if you haven't read that, go back and read that, then come back and then do this video tutorial. We're just going to go over variables, and we should all know what variables are. We're going to go over variables and data types of variables. We're going to just write a quick program that actually demonstrates that. The effectiveness of visualbasics.net to either strictly create a variable or dynamically define a variable. You have to know the difference between those two because they can cause problems, and you have to know that there's a difference between .NET, Visual Basics.net, and C# or any other language that's explicitly declaring variables as opposed to dynamically declaring variables. Visual Basic.net can do both of those, but we're going to explore why one is better than the other. So you want to go to File, New, Project, and start a WPF project. Name your project here. I like to leave WPF there and then name it wherever I want. Choose where you want to save it and then hit OK. Once you do that, this window should open up, and then you'll have I want you to go ahead and create a label. You don't have to name it because we're not really using it. You want to create a text box, and then once you create the text box in your properties panel over here, you're going to give it a name. And remember, we talked about camel casing, so I put txt input here, and the type is a text box. You don't have to worry about that. That comes automatically. Just make sure you put the name there. And below that we have another text box, and that's called txt output. Below that we have a button called go, and we name that btn go, and we have a button called clear, and we name that btn clear. Unlike Visual Basics, you'll notice that in WPF you can click on the button itself, double click it, and it'll go into the code behind. Or you can click it once, click the name once, and you can actually change the name right there in the view. As you can see, this name is changed, and in my content down here, it's changed. So, but I want to put that back to go. Alright, so once you have your interface looking like this, we're going to go behind. We're just going to start declaring some variables. So I'm going to put, let's say dim, and starting a variable off in Visual Basics always starts with dim. My string, string. Let's say dim my number as and I'm gonna cast this. I'm gonna type this as a date value, and this is a function I'm using to convert. As you can see, I'm converting a string date. I'm converting a string into a string date. So what I do is I put a date in there as a string. You can put anything, it'll convert it. And then once I do that, I can say, now once I have this here, I want you to write up this subroutine, and we know what subroutines are. Call that subroutine out, and we're going to give it a value as string. And then we're going to take that value as string, and we're going to place that value into txt output.text. So now I'm going to take this output, and I'm going to say my string. And there's my hello world. I can close that, and then I can say my string. I'm going to copy that, copy paste. run. Now what I have is hello world 42, and as you can see, I put this in as October 1st, 2015, but look how it wrote it out. So this date value converted it into an actual text into an actual date. So what do we mean by explicitly declaring a data type or a variable? Explicitly means like what we have here. I'm putting dim string as dim my string as string equals hello world. This is explicitly declaring this as a string type. Now, if I were to do this a little bit different, I'm going to copy all those, and then I'm going to change this to 2, 2, and 2. If I didn't do that, you see this error here, because you're only allowed to use this variable once. You can only declare it once. So I have to change this to 2 in order for that to work. And I'm going to take this as string out and as string out. Okay, and then I'm going to change this to 2. This will also work in VB. I'm going to run it. So what's the difference? Well, there's a huge difference behind the scenes what's happening here. Right now, this is dynamically changing it depending on the context. So Visual Basics is looking at, oh, he has strings here. He has a string here, so I'm gonna cast this as a string. I'm gonna create this variable as a string. This is a number, so I'm gonna make that out of an integer. And because I have this date value here, this function here is going to convert this as a date, and it's going to put it in there. So it's going to say, oh, okay, that must be a date, right? So sending that as a date. All right, that seems okay, but there's a huge problem that's happening behind the scenes. What's happening is that, first of all, these are being... Here's a good example. Let's... do that. Now what VB is telling me is that it's unused, so I have to go ahead and use that. I'm gonna go ahead and take this, and I'm gonna say equals my string 2. Now that goes away, but if you look at this, what Visual Basics has done is it says dim unknown type as an object, and this is a string, and this is an object. So the only way this is going to create this unknown type as a string is after the program has run. So it's going to have to delete this memory position and start a new position or memory slot that is actually going to contain the string. That's actually going to have to make a new slot for the string. So you have this shifting around going on in the back end, and it's much less efficient than just to say as string. So I'm going to type it as a string, and now I don't have to do all those acrobats in the back end to be able to have this start off as an object and then as a string. Now as you can see, this is a string as a string. This is a string. So I'm casting both of these as strings, and this is a string. So I don't have to do any extra work behind the scenes. That will eventually, if you have more code, that's going to slow everything down. You want to go ahead and try to use strict casting, explicit casting, explicit data types, because you want your program to be efficient, even though Visual Basics can do both of them. So what I'm expecting is everyone to go ahead and turn this in. You can copy this code. You can add to it if you want. But basically, I want you to copy this down and test it and do different things with it. And make sure your interface looks something like this. And I'll see you guys next time.